February the 24th. I don't know if I have to wait for somebody to push the record or, okay. All right, so we're gonna approve the minutes of the last meeting, the February 17th meeting. I'd entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the last meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, motion is approved. We're going to move on to new business, which is Board of Health appointments. And we've been, is somebody going to present on this? Okay, Kathleen.
I can, yes. So as a charter county, the council actually needs to officially designate a Board of Health. This is established in RCW 70.05.035. It states that the county legislative authority shall establish a local Board of Health and may prescribe the membership and selection process for the board. If the council wants to proceed with this now, we can ask staff or Lindsay to research and draft an ordinance for the council's future consideration. So today is just asking if the council would like to move forward with this designation for the Board of Health, and then if so, then we'll bring back a draft resolution for your consideration and then take it to a hearing after that.
Okay, I actually, as chair, would recommend that we do go ahead with this. The reason being that it's been neglected or it was an oversight. And although that the state legislature is working on, ideas for an expanded Board of Health, I just think that we should establish the autonomy that we currently have and, establish our Board of Health here. And so ask staff to, or Lindsay, to do an ordinance. I'll take your thoughts, council.
Well, Aaron, raise your finger. I just want to make a few points. The timing really couldn't be, I don't know what the legislature's got to do. We know what the governor's proposed. We know what's being hammered out in the legislature right now. I guess the point I want to make is I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time looking at how we may restructure or do anything different because the legislature may dictate that to us. I think that we should basically check the block, if you will, with what we have just to get it properly voted on. And then we'll find out and look at different options. If we have options, I certainly would like some change potentially on the Board of Health as far as membership, at least. So I'd like to just do what we need to do to comply with the law, but not spend an inordinate amount of time because of all the work that's happening at the state level.
And Madam Chair, I largely concur with what I've heard and with what Councillor Medvedev just said. It seems like we kind of have two points of discussion here. One is meeting the legal requirement that was overlooked of just formally appointing the Board of Health regardless of its composition. And I support moving forward with that quickly so that we get that done. I also do, though, welcome a conversation about the composition of the board at a future date. I think it makes all the sense in the world to wait and see what happens with the legislature so we don't have to do this twice, potentially. But depending on the outcome of that, I would welcome that conversation at a future date.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I think what I heard is we're okay to move forward if there's not a lot of time spent and we're just fulfilling the law, that essentially we are, the Board of Health is the same composition as the county has had for years. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, okay. So let's ask Lindsay then to not reinvent the wheel. Just go ahead and find either maybe an ordinance that existed for the commissioners before here in Clark County, or some other model legislation that would help us to be in line with what the RCW requires us to do. Okay. We had head nods. Do we actually have to have a vote on that? Would you like that?
No, I did hear at least 3 verbalize their support, so that should be fine. So Lindsay will bring back a draft ordinance for your review later.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to councilor reports.
I just have a follow-up on the Board of Health, of which we're all members. I would like to go back to those minutes of the 27th of January, when the chair suggested that our monthly meeting as the Board of Health would be scheduled for an hour and a half. And I don't believe you stated this necessarily at the time, but I would simply add, so that there is time for some planning and discussion beyond the report that Dr. Melnick presents to us. That's first item. And the second one is that I would like to propose that we have a second meeting each month, in which we don't ask staff to prepare another time-consuming report, but that instead it be devoted as a Q&A period, planning period, discussion period, just to keep in touch with what the issues are on a more regular basis than once a month, which I think is not enough during this very critical time in vaccination distributions in the county.
I'd take input from other counselors on that.
Well, I concur. I think we should be meeting more regularly, and I've kind of uniformly stated that over the last year. And the second meeting, I would just reiterate, it doesn't need to be a big, long presentation. We could just deal with action items, just deal with work that we need to do, and keep the time to a minimum. It doesn't have to be nearly as long.
Lance, do you have any comment?
I think that as we saw earlier in the pandemic, there are occasionally times when it does make sense to meet more often. I would be okay with adding another meeting that is more of a check-in than a full report out. But also checking, but making that perhaps not a standing meeting, but as needed. So for the next couple of months, it may be very well needed, but then as things stabilize and normalize a bit, ideally, being able to pull back from that so that we are maximizing the use of all of our time and staff time.
I would concur with that at this point in time, it may be required that we have this additional meeting, but that down the road, this doesn't need to be a set in stone type of every other week that we meet as a Board of Health. But as previously stated, this is an unusual time, and perhaps there are things we could cover in that second meeting, what we don't cover in the first. But I want to go back to, if we're going to have 2 meetings, do we need 90 minutes? And perhaps we do. This has happened on several occasions where we really have absolutely no time whatsoever to either get clarification or ask questions because the information presented takes almost the entire hour. The other thing that we could do is while we want a very thorough report, there are parts of it that maybe could be reduced to a 45-minute presentation. But I'll just throw that out there and get comment.
guess is that if we go to 2 meetings a month, that the quantity of information that Dr. Melnick will need to give in that one report will be lessened because we'll have more frequent communication. And that's what we're needing, as I see it, is more frequent communication, which therefore allows more quantity of not just information given to us, but of discussion. So it may have a nice effect for that monthly meeting as well.
So you're saying we don't need 90 minutes? We could do it in 60?
I'm not saying that. I think that your point was well made. That, for example, today, we just plain ran out of time. We did in January as well, and that's why you suggested the 90 minutes back then. So I think let's just go ahead and schedule it for 90, and like with every other meeting, we quit when we're done.
Yeah, I suppose we don't need to use the entire 90 minutes if we don't have to, but
No.
this is a day when we have work sessions too. So, you know, we have run out of time on numerous occasions.
Mhm.
And it is an arbitrary, sort of an arbitrary 1 hour meeting that I think we could expand to 90 minutes. I would expect that the second meeting, if it's not going to have a major presentation, I'm wondering the kinds of, well, I'm hoping, here's my hope, that if we're going to have a second meeting and we have questions, et cetera, that those questions are going to be able to be answered by Dr. Melnick or the health department without any heads up about what the questions are. You know, that could create a little bit, I'll get back to you stuff. So, but, you know, I don't know, I don't really quite envision what, I know that the public has some questions, and maybe we could pose some of the questions that we receive from emails, so we can be, because we are their representatives, we can be their advocate and ask some of those questions so that they're clarified to the public. So I'm willing to do this if the rest of the council is willing to do it. And as I say, if it's not set in stone or at any point in time, we could, you know, draw back that second meeting if we feel it's not necessary. Okay.
So I concur that we should schedule the 90 minutes. I think this, what you last discussed, is agenda control issues. So one, Dr. Melnick may have news of the day that he wants to tell us about. Two, from the last meeting or emails that we get or just questions we generate, we should be sending those to the chair to create an agenda for that second meeting. And then if we don't need the entire 90 minutes, perfect. We'll end half an hour early or an hour early. You know, I think it's just agenda driven, and we should just keep close track of what should be discussed so we can have answers at that second meeting.
And I'm assuming that the second meeting is a 60-minute meeting.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think it needs to be 90 minutes or scheduling, because it builds up our schedule, therefore moves back if we have a work session that moves it down further. And so, okay. All right. If the council's in agreement, then we'll do that. Kathleen, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard everything correctly so I can communicate with Dr. Melnick. So the main meeting will be now 90 minutes. We'll start that at 8:30 because it will back up to council time and other work sessions. This is going to push out some future work sessions because we always schedule them at 9, but we'll start the main meeting at 8:30, go till 10. The other meetings will be 60 minutes. We'll schedule those. Do you want to do that at 9 to 10? Because that is going to push out work sessions quite a ways, and we're starting to get a lot of requests for those, but we can do it from 9 to 10, or we can do 8:30 to 9:30 or 8 to 9, and that is going to be no formal presentation from Dr. Melnick. If he has new information that is pertinent for the board to know, he'll share that information, but that is really focused on questions and answers. And I do agree, if we can get any questions ahead of time that he can be prepared, I think that would be most efficient.
Okay, my vote is for 9 a.m., not 8:30 for the second meeting. And I understand that the new 90-minute meeting will now begin at 8:30. Even though we're getting so used to being remote that, 8:30 shouldn't be early, but we'll begin at 8:30 so that because there are other already scheduled meetings, so we don't want to bump up against those. Is that right, Council? We okay with that? I see I can't see you, Temple. So are you saying yes?
Nodding, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. That covers that item. Work session requests. Oh, excuse me.
We don't have.
Are there any other counselor reports? I'm sorry. Any other counselor reports? Okay, on to work session requests.
There are no requests today.
Lindsay,
Good
policy
morning.
issue.
I don't have anything today. We continue to monitor the floor action as we come up to the House of Origin cutoff. So working with staff to get Josh all the information at rapid pace that he needs. So that's really the only update, and we'll have our full legislative update on Monday with Josh.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Do we have a meeting Friday? Or is that every other?
It's every other week, and we do not
Okay,
have one
sorry.
this week. It's next week.
Okay. Okay,
But
thank
I
you.
would encourage you on the issue of the vaccines, even though we don't have a meeting this week, I know that will probably be a topic that the council will be interested in bringing up next week, but would encourage you to reach out to the delegation and let them know because they're on the floor right now, their schedule is, it's simultaneously wide open and packed. Because they have to go into the budget, or they have to go into their caucuses and then back to vote and all of these things. So they're going to be certainly expecting a lot of emails and phone calls on a variety of issues right now. And so it would be a good time to reach out to them and express any concerns directly. I will definitely get the letter going, but I think the more direct contact that we have with them will be an effective way to get that message across.
Thank you. Will do. Executive, if that's it on the policy issues, our next thing is the executive session. And what I see here is one potential litigation for 30 minutes. Was there another one, Kathleen, or is that just it?
Sorry, that's the entirety of
Okay.
executive session.
And no action?
Correct.
Correct, no action.
Correct, right, okay. All right, we will adjourn our council time then and go into executive session, which we need to sign into. So,
Madam Chair, before we,
yes,
I did, because I had a separate conversation with Lindsay and I wasn't sure where this could best come in. So very briefly, as briefly as I can, and this was mainly, I think, led by Julie Olson, that we were going to look at rural businesses beyond wineries, because it was a small chunk of the pie where a winery said, hey, we want to have wedding venues, and then the ordinance code was changed just for them. But there are a lot of businesses out there that would be appropriate as well. We started down that path. Mitch had some open hearings, was doing a lot of work on it, and then it kind of just fell off the radar screen. And then we had the pandemic. We also, in a parallel course, where was the equestrian code and some of the associated equestrian businesses out in the rural community. The two overlapping issues are operational impacts. That's what the county should be most concerned about. Those citizens that are out in the rural county that don't want extra dust, noise, commercial activity, waste, generation, operational impacts. I think it's the same no matter whether it's equestrian or rural business venue. So we need to come up with an idea of how are we going to address this? Do we move forward with an overarching big chunk approach, or do we look at individual businesses to add to the winery list. I mean, I think we need to make progress on the rural businesses. I've got a constituent with a flower business wants to have a wedding venue as well. And it sounds like their property is absolutely perfectly situated to handle that with no operational impacts. Right now, they're kind of dead in the water, as a lot of other businesses are. So I just wanted to bring that up and see how other counselors wanted to proceed, because I would like to make progress, not only on the equestrian code and those related businesses, but other potential rural businesses as well.
So we had a
Brian,
discussion about, go ahead, Kathleen.
No, I just for your information as a reminder, so the equestrian stakeholder group, Mitch has already drafted a process on how we're moving forward based on the conversation at the retreat. And at the retreat, the council did decide at that time to put the other item that Councilor Meviji just mentioned on hold for the future. So I just wanted to remind everybody that recent conversation.
And I was just going to remind Councilor Medveji that we did talk about this during the retreat. We have put it on hold. One of the reasons we're putting it on hold is because it is a major change in our code. And I think that we have to have public input for this. And I don't know whether this one property owner can find a way to have a permit or conditional permit or something for one-time event. If he can't, well, I guess we just have to wait. But this is not the appropriate time to make major changes to our code. It is a major change, not just a process. It's a change.
So I agree with that, but I think we're conflating issues here. And what we heard previously on the rural business is that one of the discoveries during that process was that there were a lot of ways to legally have some of these businesses permitted. What I know just from this one constituent that they basically got no help whatsoever in finding an alternative way to move forward. What I want to emphasize is we are going to be dealing with the equestrian code. We're going to be dealing with the operational impacts. That's the point I'm emphasizing. Those operational impacts apply beyond the equestrian code. I think we should all be mindful of that, because that'll inform us on what we can do or shouldn't do as we move forward with open sessions on the rural business. I agree, we need to have public participation, but I just don't want to lose sight of the overarching impact of the operations. That's the gist of where we get complaints. That's what we're concerned about. And it applies beyond the equestrian code. That's all I'm trying to highlight here.
It does apply beyond the equestrian code, but there are different issues that would apply to the other as well. So this can be taken into account as the stakeholder group moves on and some of those issues are brought up. But I don't want to simultaneously be moving with this other thing, because it is different. It's different than the equestrian. It's different. The issues are different, and as well as the group. I mean, it's a different group of people, a different kind of venue. So at any rate, I understand that there is some overlap, and where there is, we can learn from this stakeholder group that is dealing with the equestrian code. So if we've covered that, let's adjourn this meeting and go to our executive session, which we need to sign into separately. Okay, we're adjourned.